Welcome back to the League of Extraordinary Atheists for Humanism, where we attempt to apply logic and reason to religion and politics. Sorry about the break. This is basically a whole brand new video. We're moving on to the next topic. We did just do a video of the Democratic debates. I'm not quite sure where we landed up, but we were at the end of the topic.
Right.
So we are going to go over the Afghanistan papers, or the IG report, or the lessons learned report, whatever we're calling it.
Yeah.
So we are going to move on to that. I do want to share real quick in the chat, though. Oh, I don't think I copied it. There we go. We are trying to raise funds for Nacho to get a new computer, so stuff like this doesn't happen anymore, and so he can help other people as he does with their streams and their shows, and it would be much appreciated if you can donate anything at all. $1, $5, $10, anything really helps. We need to get him a new computer, not just for us, but for everything he does for the community, which is a lot.
Yeah.
I don't even know half of what he does for the community, but I know so many people love this guy, and
he's like the computery bits 007.
He is. So please, for just a nickel a day, you can save a Nacho.
In the arms of Nacho.
All right.
Should never do that again.
All jokes aside, please help us help Nacho, help you, help the world.
The world.
All right. Christy has a 17-minute piece of just straight fucking information, which I love. And then if we're still going, we're going to talk about it just a little bit, and then send you all to bed. Send you all off to bed.
Yes.
Take it away, Christy. Santiago.
On this fantastic Friday night of extreme humanism.
Extreme humanism.
I don't even
fucking take it away, Christy.
You will let me love you.
This is great.
I have empathy. Sorry. Okay.
Good. All you.
Afghanistan papers. Goodness. I do have to say before I start that because I like to be informed and I love the website antiwar.com, nothing in this was like, oh man, a revelation. For me, it wasn't. I understand that for a lot of Americans it was, just like for a lot of Americans learning that there were no weapons of mass destruction from George Bush was a big deal. Because there were a few things that I hadn't heard before, people coming out that we didn't know had come out because it had been suppressed. That's true. That is true. But as far as like what I take from all of the information together was not a revelation to me. It was it was, I'm glad this is finally coming out, because at least it was on the front page of mainstream, and so people can at least then maybe, if they're like, what's this about, they look into it. That's my biggest hope of this. I don't think it's not like the Pentagon papers, as far as there weren't a whole bunch of secret top secret things that had been leaked, which we needed to know about. It wasn't, none of this was top secret. However, I will get into some parts that the people that were trying to keep this from coming out did, in retrospect, go back and redact a lot, and the reasoning is suspicious. So we'll get into that. At War with the Truth was the title of this particular piece, and I will quote from it often. U.S. officials constantly said they were making progress. They were not, and they knew it. A confidential trove of government documents obtained by the Washington Post reveals that senior U.S. officials failed to tell the truth about the war in Afghanistan throughout the 18-year campaign, hiding unmistakable evidence the war was unwinnable. So, so far, anybody that's informed would say, duh. These documents.
Sorry. Real quick, before you get too far into it, I do want to throw one important point in here, and it's that they failed to tell the truth to the American people.
Yep.
Which is a nice way of saying, obviously, they lied to the American
They're
people.
lying liars that lie.
Yeah. They didn't just fail to tell the truth.
Right.
I just had to say something because, and I know you know this, I know everyone knows this, but it needs to be said a little more often.
Yeah, we need to give it the weight it has.
Yeah, it's the poorest framing to give this.
It is. And on that, what you just said, think about what, in a democracy, what is the purpose of a government? It's to represent the citizens.
Yeah.
That's what the point of it is.
Yeah.
So we're so far removed from that.
Yeah. I'm going to do minimal interrupting you, I promise.
You're fine.
Every time I hear that, it really grinds my gears.
Yeah. Because they don't want to say they lied. They want to say they weren't truthful.
They just failed to tell the truth. It's just blatant. It's just...
Right.
All right. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
You can have it all again.
No, take it away. These documents were generated by a federal project examining the root failures of the longest armed conflict in our nation's history. So I remember growing up when NAM was the longest. It was 12 years, and I remember thinking, God, that's a long time to just be murdering each other. And here we are. Times have changed, technology's changed. We can cause, 1 million lives lost and lose 2,000 now instead of 1 million on both sides. That's really all that's changed as far as, the army with the most technology is going to win. The army with the most funding has always won because they could outlast the other side, but now it's just even more gruesome, unfair. So when they say that they failed to tell the truth, there's so much more to that than just them going, don't mention that to, at Thanksgiving dinner, just don't bring it up. It's not. The weight of it is huge. And I really hope that is what many people got from it, was that, again, we've been duped by the organization that a democracy puts together to represent the people. So they include more than 2,000 pages of previously unpublished notes of interviews with people who actually played a direct role in this war, from generals and diplomats to aid workers and Afghan officials as well. Our government of freedom, the American dream, the freedom country, tried to shield the identities of the vast majority of these interviewed for this project and conceal nearly all of their remarks. Washington Post won release of these documents under the Freedom of Information Act, which, thank the gods, their gods, that we have this as a tool, even though we have to spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in court and go through it not just once or twice, sometimes 3 times to get them to comply with the rules that are set up to make them comply. It's so aggravating. And only after a 3-year court battle, so the law is, under the Freedom of Information Act, you put together, you fill out all the paperwork that just as you're supposed to and what you need to know, and you send it in. And after so many years, all things are up for grabs. That's supposed to be the way that we're supposed to have transparency in our government. Remember those words, transparent? Well, no, they only apply when they want to know what the other side has, is what I'm finding. The Republicans want the Democrats to be transparent. The Democrats want the Republicans to be transparent, when little do most Americans know that they're both signing on to all the same fucking policies. So pay attention. In these interviews, more than 400 insiders offered unrestrained criticism of what went wrong in Afghanistan and how the United States became mired in 2 decades of warfare. These interviews also lay bare pent-up complaints, frustrations, and confessions, along with second guessing and backbiting. So one of these quotes from that particular part of this article was, quote, "We were devoid of a fundamental understanding of Afghanistan. We didn't know what we were doing." Douglas Lute, a 3-star Army general who served as the White House Afghan war czar. this is the guy who would know. He was the war czar during the Bush and Obama administrations, and he told government interviewers in 2015, quote, what are we trying to do here? We didn't have the foggiest notion of what we were undertaking, end quote. Another one, quote, if the American people knew the magnitude of this dysfunction, ... 2,400 lives lost, Lute added, blaming the deaths of the U.S. military personnel on bureaucratic breakdowns among Congress, the Pentagon, and the State Department. Saying also, who will say this war is in vain? Since 2001, more than 775,000 U.S. troops have deployed to Afghanistan, many repeatedly. Now, this number does not in any way include all the people that have been there. The way our government has learned to do things is to throw a whole shit ton of money into private military, private contractors, and we don't know those numbers. And that's a good way for the government to say, oh, only 2,400 people were killed in this war, when really is much, much higher than that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Actually, go ahead and read the next sentence you're going to read, and then I'll say
2,300 died there, and 20,589 were wounded in action, according to the Defense Department figures, which does not account for private contractors.
Right. And I would like to know that number, which I don't know right now.
No, we can't. It's private.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is. The Freedom of Information Act does not apply.
Yeah.
And we may never, they do not have to tell us.
Yeah, that's...
And how many private organizations are there? I can name 6. Those are the ones I know about.
Yeah, just the ones you know. Yeah. So...
Or CIA or FBI or any of it doesn't include that.
No. So I'm going to share a link that I already shared a few minutes ago. And then I closed it on mine. Good thing I shared it. Pushed the wrong button. Shared it, closed it, opened it. I actually shared this before we went live the first time on Facebook. Because I said that, for those who don't know, the Washington Post recently published this report about the Afghanistan war and all that jazz. What we're talking about now. So I gave them a link to this page that I'm looking at, and basically it just has a picture of dead children that died because of our actions there. Mm-hmm. Because something we don't talk about with these numbers that are in the Washington Post, like as soon as I got to this point in the reporting, I'm like, well, that's only the U.S. side. How many people have died on the Afghanistan side?
Oh,
it's and
awful. The numbers that you'll get per our government are not actual numbers. If you go to Afghanistan's government.gov and look at their numbers, it's in the millions.
Yeah, and what I'm looking at right now is Watson Brown EDU. That's what it gave, and it says 147,000 people have been killed in Afghanistan since 2001. More than 38,000 of those killed have been civilians. So again, that's from Watson Brown. Even if that is just a number, the number of civilians that we've killed over there almost doubles the amount of, let me double check, the wounded American soldiers that we have. It's 20 times the amount of people almost. It's 18 times, we'll say. 18 times the amount of people who died on our side. Yeah. That's crazy on its own. So just taking it at the correct number, which we don't think it is, right. It is so disproportionate. And that's something that you don't need to just hang your hat on and move on, but you could. You could.
Yeah. It is. And how many of those were wedding parties or funeral parties or it's
farmers?
Yeah.
Or kids. So
or hospitals or schools or school buses. I mean,
the point is, it was some. So, of each
there's
of those.
data that shows that yes, UN numbers are higher than our government numbers, and Afghanistan's numbers are even higher than that.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not going to interrupt you a lot, but that was a point I had up just in case we got to that part. So, all right.
Okay.
Passing it back to you, Christy.
All right. Okay, documents. More than 2,000 pages of interviews and memos reveal a secret history of the war. The interviews also highlight the U.S. government's botched attempts to curtail runaway corruption, build a competent Afghan army and police force, and put a dent in Afghanistan's thriving opium trade. Which caveat I am not believing a word of. Before we decided to go in and occupy Afghanistan, the world still used opium, but between 2 and 7% of the world's opium came from Afghanistan. Now 98% of the world's opium comes from Afghanistan. It's so hard because I don't have concrete evidence of any of this stuff. I just know that there's pictures of our military guarding the fields, which could be innocent. They could have showed up, kicked bad guys off, and guarded it until they could burn it down. I don't know. I can't say. But I do know that 2 to 7% of the world's opium and 98%, it flipped. That's, if we're helping them be in charge over there, what are we doing? And then my mind goes to, because human minds, we have monkey brains, goes immediately to, well, there's an opioid epidemic and 98% of the world's, and then we're occupying it and we're the country. You could go around a rabbit hole of conspiracy theories with that. And if you don't want it to look like that as a government, well, then you could probably do something about that. That's all I'm saying. Is that just, it's not, we'll know so much more in 45 years after the war ends, which isn't now, so 45 years from whenever the war ends, under the Freedom of Information Act, some journalists will have to sue the government to know what actually happened. And unfortunately, at this point, we don't know when it comes to the opium fields.
We don't.
No, not at all. So I can't say either way. I just know what the only things I know they don't add up to anything good.
Yeah. I'm glad you pointed out the numbers there with the opium trade thing, because that's important. Also, I want to ask for clarification though on that. Did you say you disagreed with what you just read?
I don't believe that they were, because one of the things is they wanted to put a dent in Afghanistan's thriving opium trade before they went in. That was their objective. 2 to 7% of the world's opium came from there, but you wanted to put a dent in it. And since we've been there, now it's 98%.
Yes.
I'm not, Einstein. Yeah. I just know that we're occupying the country. So, yeah. But and I could be totally off on this. It could be that because we're there, it has made all of these groups like the Taliban grow and be able to use the America being there as propaganda. And because that, they're funding themselves with more poppy fields. It could be all kinds of things. I just know the numbers aren't good. They're not showing anything good. If your objective was to put a dent in Afghanistan's thriving opium trade and now it's the world's supplier, you fucked up.
Yeah. The I wanted to point out, because I had to read that part like 3 or 4 times, and I usually only have to read things 2 times. But it says the interviews also highlighted the U.S. government's botched attempts to curtail runaway corruption, build on competent Afghan army and police force, and put a dent in Afghanistan's thriving opium trade. And the first time I read it, it sounded to me like they were saying that they put a dent in Afghanistan's thriving opium trade. because it's so long.
It's
starts to
opposite
feel like
day.
yeah. But it says at
It's
the
quirky.
beginning of that sentence that it says it was botched attempts to put a dent in Afghanistan's
Yes.
trade.
It was one of their objectives when they went in. One
Right.
of the attempts that they botched.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah. And
So,
and what you were pointing out was the sure it was.
right.
Okay. Yeah. That's the clarification I wanted to
Yes,
see.
yes.
Okay.
All right, and then right underneath that, we'll go to, and since 2001, the Defense Department, State Department, and U.S. Agency for International Development have spent or appropriated between $934 billion and $978 billion, according to the inflation-adjusted estimate calculated by Netta Crawford, a political science professor and co-director of the Costs of War at Brown University. These figures do not include money spent by other agencies such as the CIA department, like I had mentioned earlier, the Department of Veteran Affairs, which is responsible for all veterans who are coming back for their when they come in, they get assessed after war. All of this is Veterans Affairs. This is not including any of that, let alone amputees or people who need physical therapy for years and years and years, or a wheelchair, or a veteran should not have to worry about their medical when they come back. However, the system does. This is something that if we were to add those costs to it, we're talking well over 3 trillion, well over for what we have right now for Afghanistan. And that's just adding Veterans Affairs to the numbers we have right now, not the CIA, the FBI, or private contractors. So this is the wounded vets, nor does this massive amount of taxpayer-funded money include any of the private contractors. We don't even count the private contractors' deaths. So I have a quote for right after that, which is it's all in the Afghanistan papers. Quote, what did we get for this 1 trillion effort? Was it worth 1 trillion? Jeffrey Eggers, a retired Navy SEAL and White House staffer for Bush and Obama, told government interviewers, he added, after the killing of Osama bin Laden, I said that Osama was probably laughing in his watery grave considering how much we spent on Afghanistan. The documents also contradict a long chorus of public statements from U.S. presidents, military commanders, and diplomats who assured Americans year after year, press conference after press conference, I remember all of them, that they were making progress in Afghanistan. And do you guys remember Obama coming out saying next year, the war's ended, next year, we're bringing everybody home? That year came, and here we are going into 2020. And the next president said he's going to end all these wars, and the only war he's actually ended is the fake war on Christmas. Yeah. So, I mean, it's something. I did want to read this next part, which I found pretty enlightening. Several of those interviewed described explicit and sustained efforts by the U.S. government to deliberately mislead public. They said it was common at military headquarters in Kabul and in the White House to distort statistics to make it appear the United States was winning the war when that was not the case. Quote, every data point was altered to present the best picture possible. Bob Crowley, an Army colonel who served as senior counterinsurgency advisor to the U.S. military commanders in 2013 and 2014. He told government interviewers, quote, surveys, for instance, were totally unreliable, but reinforced that everything we were doing was right, and we became a self-licking ice cream cone.
Yeah, I saw that part. That was crazy.
John Sopko, the head of the federal agency that conducted the interviews, acknowledged to the Post that the documents show the American people have consistently been lied to. So he at least said it, he didn't say they failed to tell the truth. John, the interviews are a byproduct of a project led by Sopko's agency, the Office of the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, known as SIGAR, SIGAR. The agency was created by Congress in 2008 to investigate waste and fraud in the war zone. In 2014, at SAPCO's direction, SIGAR departed from its usual mission of performing audits and launched a side venture. And this is what you had brought up. It's called Lessons Learned. That was the side venture. And the $11 million project was meant to diagnose policy failures in Afghanistan so the United States would not repeat the mistakes next time it invaded a country or tried to rebuild a shattered one. They tried to but that's not, we haven't helped rebuild a country since World War II, when we went in and helped Britain and helped France and helped Germany rebuild, although Germany got the shit end of that stick.
Yeah, they did. Well, one thing I've heard about Germany is like it's the cleanest country in the world, so that's kind of like they cleaned up. But
yes, they did.
That aside, side point,
yes,
fun fact, more or less. One of the things that they said, and I wish I remembered like the exact numbers, but we've spent more, I think, on rebuilding Afghanistan than we did Britain after World War II. It's somewhere in the document. I listened to it almost a week ago now. That was a bad day for me. Like when this report came out and Bernie unendorsed Cenk Uygur. Yeah. There was like one or two other things. Like the news was making me just furious all day. That might have been the same day that I decided to like do some background research on Vietnam too. So like,
read the Pentagon Papers. Everything you want to know is in the Pentagon Papers.
I've been through some of those before, and
that made my jaw hit the floor way more than this. This is, we've been living this, and if you read anything, not what they're telling you, what the actual reports are saying, none of this is a surprise. What's a surprise is that all of these people spoke out. Lessons Learned staff interviewed more than 600 people with firsthand experience in the war. Most were Americans, but SIGAR analysts also traveled to London, Brussels, and Berlin to interview NATO allies. In addition, they interviewed about 20 Afghan officials discussing reconstruction and development programs. Drawing partly on the interviews as well as other government records statistics, SIGAR has published 7 lessons learned reports since 2016 that highlight problems in Afghanistan and recommend changes to stabilize the country. But the reports, written in dense bureaucratic prose and focused on an alphabet soup of government initiatives, left out the harshest and most frank criticisms from interviews. Of course they did. I think that, that's so important to, when you have somebody come out that's critical to the narrative, to hear what is being said. And in a democracy, the most important thing is an informed electorate who can then vote as an informed electorate should. Now, if we don't know that the people that are in the thick of it are critical of this, that are having mad issues with it, that they don't even be a part of it because they don't know who's the bad guy. They have warlords. They're working with warlords who had slaves because that warlord was letting them on their property without causing problems. That's some of the stories. Other stories are this warlord hated this guy because they would get on each other's turf. So he told the CIA that guy was a terrorist. So we would go scoop him up, put a cover over his head, and haul him off to Guantanamo Bay. Yeah, he was a bad guy. He was a warlord, but so was the guy who turned him in. Like, it's just a fucking mess. It's just insane. It says, quote, we found the stabilization strategy and the programs used to achieve it were not properly tailored to the Afghan context. And successes in stabilizing Afghan districts rarely lasted longer than the physical presence of coalition troops and civilians. Read the introduction to one report released in May 2018. So we have Bush, Obama, and Trump. Nothing's changed. That That should wake people up. What I didn't like about Washington Post is they didn't bring up Trump, but they would say the dates. And some of the dates even went to Bush Sr., but so then say them so people understand Bush, Clinton, and not so much, and then Bush, and then Obama, and then Trump. Like, there's 4 presidents that nothing has changed. And that should wake anyone up, because we have Republicans and Democrats voting and protecting this lie, going on and on about it. And I'm not dumb enough to think, well, they didn't know. Then what kind of president are you? Maybe Trump doesn't know. Maybe Bush didn't know. He was kind of a ding dong too. But I'm sure Obama read and knew these things. So then he just lied to everyone's face. And if that doesn't turn your stomach and make you want to get out and be a part of democracy, then I don't know what to tell you, because we're murdering people in the name of nothing. We shouldn't be there anymore. So
literally in the name of nothing.
In the name of nothing at this point. In the name of selling weapons to the and helping the military-industrial complex. You know, yeah. I'm sorry, AKA America's economy.
Yeah.
The reports also omitted the names of more than 90% of the people who were interviewed for the project. While a few officials agreed to speak on the record to Cigar, the agency said it promised anonymity. I have that word is so hard for my dyslexic brain. To everyone else it interviewed to avoid controversy over politically sensitive matters. Under the Freedom of Information Act, the Post began seeking lessons learned interview records in August 2016. Cigar refused, told them no way, arguing that the documents were privileged and that the public had no right to see them. Think about that. You guys can pay for this war, but you can't see what we're talking about. The Post had this. Go ahead.
Sorry. Just want to put that out there. The way I see it, and I hope everyone agrees with me, but if you don't, I'd love to talk more about it. It's just, I think anything the government does should be public knowledge. I think anything that the government...
It's okay to have top secret parts of our intelligence, of course. However...
Yeah, but even...
Yeah,
even then, it should have less than a 20-year...
oh yeah, I agree.
Like whatever. Like, if something has to be top secret, I'm like, okay, I get that. When are you releasing it? It's not, right. Are you? It's when are you? And if there's any hesitation, I'm like, okay, you can fucking drop it now. Like, I don't want to pay for anything, and I don't want anyone else paying for anything that we don't have a right to know. If the government pays a private company like Blackwater to do something, that is now public knowledge. As far as I'm concerned, there should be no hiding taxpayer funded anything.
Yeah, because it's being done in your name.
Yeah, and the only reason that they would hire a private company is one, to either save money, two, to either not really save money but have it, given to someone else, or three, to get past a legal thing so they don't have to share what they're doing. And all of this seems shitty fuckery to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nacha had just mentioned, there's some things that will need a longer life of privacy, like our aircrafts, our technology, things like that. Yes, I agree. Where the specific bombs are, who people are, who connections are, who assets are around, no names need to come out. I get all of that. I understand all that. And I also support all that. However, when you take $100 million and give it to a private agency for a 3-week, campaign to go over and do what? We would like to know what the objective is. You don't have to tell us your coordinates. Obviously, other countries can read, what is put out. But I think that if we're all in it together and it's in our name and we've agreed on it, that's different than it's in our name and we have no idea, and we're not even allowed to have an idea. but we're just supposed to shut up and accept it. And then shit goes wrong and they still don't want to let us see. I have that's fundamentally wrong.
Yeah. And I mean, I understand that there may need to be exceptions, especially like to that 20-year rule or whatever that I mentioned. But if there are exceptions, then they just need to be principled. They need to be laid out what those exceptions are and how long. I can be fine with that.
Right.
I'm a reasonable person. Most people are, like when you're talking to someone.
Right. We wouldn't want, nobody would really, can't imagine somebody would want to endanger American personnel.
No, absolutely.
We're not talking about that.
No. But for the most part, I still need to double down a little bit and say, if you don't want us knowing something, then maybe don't do it. Like the basic rule of thumb. Again, I understand there are exceptions. For the most part, really ask yourself, if you need to hide it, don't fucking do it. Especially not in our name. That's just how I feel about it.
I agree. On cigar refusing, the Post did have to sue SIGAR, cigar, in federal court twice under the Freedom of Information Act to compel it to release these documents. The agency did eventually disclose more than 2,000 pages of unpublished notes and transcripts from 428 interviews, as well as the documents identify 62 of the people who were interviewed, but Cigar blacked out the names of 366 others. In legal briefs, the agency contended that those individuals should be seen as whistleblowers and informants who might face humiliation, harassment, retaliation, or physical harm if their names became public. By cross-referencing dates and other details from the documents, the Post independently identified 33 other people who were interviewed, including several former ambassadors, generals, and White House officials. The Post has asked a federal judge to force Cigar to disclose the names of everyone else interviewed, arguing that the public has a right to know which officials criticized the war and asserted that the government had misled the American people during those critical times. The Post also argued the officials were not whistleblowers or informants because they were not interviewed as part of an investigation. Like that's huge. They weren't blowing the whistle on anything. They were asked to be interviewed and they gave their opinions. Yeah. A decision by Judge Amy Berman Jackson of the U.S. District Court in Washington has been pending since late September. However, the Post is publishing the documents now, which was last week, instead of waiting for a final ruling to inform the public, while the Trump administration is negotiating with the Taliban and considering whether to withdraw 13,000 U.S. troops who remain in Afghanistan. Let's see. I don't know. We don't want to. That doesn't matter. To augment the lessons learned interviews, the Post obtained hundreds of pages of previously classified memos about the Afghan war that were dictated by the Defense Secretary Donald H. Rumsfeld between 2001 and 2006. So if anybody knows anything about him, he's not a good person. Right. He does these snowflakes, these classified memos. Yeah, they were called snowflakes by Rumsfeld and his staff. The memos are brief instructions or comments that the Pentagon boss dictated to his underlings, often several times a day. Rumsfeld made a select number of his snowflakes public in 2011. Remember, he stopped in 2006, posting them online in conjunction with his memoir, Known and Unknown. But most of his snowflake collection, an estimated 59,000 pages, remain secret. So he's not in power in any way right now. So this is where I would say that the Freedom of Information should step in, because it's not going to impede on anything. You're not running for anything. You're not. So why shouldn't we know what you wrote in your snowflakes? Yeah, snowflake. So anyway, in 2017, in response to a FOIA lawsuit filed by the National Security Archive, a nonprofit research institute based in George Washington University, the Defense Department began reviewing and releasing the remainder of Rumsfeld's snowflakes on a rolling basis. The archives shared them with the Post. Together, the cigar interviews and Rumsfeld memos, aka snowflakes, pertaining to Afghanistan constitute a secret history of the war and an unsparing appraisal of 18 years of conflict. Worded in Rumsfeld's style, many of the snowflakes foreshadow problems that continue to haunt the U.S. military more than a decade later. So he was saying these things so long ago, but because no one was allowed to know about them then, 10 years later, because we kept saying everything's going great. If it wasn't going great, violence has ticked up. We have to send more troops. It's like a sickle. If we don't get off this ride, we don't stop it. Let's see. I may be impatient, he says in a quote. In fact, I know I'm a bit impatient, Rumsfeld wrote in one of the memos to several generals and senior aides. We are never going to get the U.S. military out of Afghanistan unless we take care to see that there, and to see that there is something going on that will provide the stability that will be necessary for us to leave help, he wrote. That's massive. That was one of the things where I'm like, this guy who is not, he is a warmonger, and he's saying, help. We're never going to get out of here. And this was so long ago, and that was frustrating. That memo was dated April 17th, 2006, which is 6 months after the war started. 6 months after the war started, he said, there's no way we're going to get out of here. Help. With their forthright descriptions of how the United States became stuck in a faraway war, as well as the government's determination to conceal them from the public, the lessons learned interviews broadly resembled the Pentagon paper, Defense Department's top secret history of the Vietnam War, of NAM. When they were leaked in 1971, the Pentagon papers caused a sensation by revealing the government had long misled the public, ding, 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 about how the United States came to be embroiled in Vietnam. Bound into 47 volumes, the 7,000-page study was based entirely on internal government documents. So this is different. Diplomatic cables, decision-making memos, intelligence reports, even top secret. To preserve secrecy, Defense Secretary Robert McNamara issued an order prohibiting the authors from interviewing anyone when it came to the Pentagon Papers. Cigar's Lesson Learned project faced no such restrictions. Staffers carried out the interviews between 2014 and 2018, mostly with officials who served during the Bush and Obama years. About 30 of the interview records are transcribed word-for-word accounts. The rest are typed summaries of conversations, pages of notes and quotes from people with different vantage points in the conflict, from provincial outposts to the highest circles of power, which I say those are so important for regular American, everyday Americans, to see what everyday people who are involved in this, who are in the thick of it, say and feel and see and know about what they're dealing with. That would have been so important to know. Some of the interviews are inexplicably short. The interview record with John Allen, the Marine general who commanded U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan from 2011 to 13, consists of 5 paragraphs. In contrast, records of interviews with other influential figures are much more extensive. Former U.S. Ambassador Ryan Crocker sat for 2 interviews that yielded 95 transcribed pages. Unlike the Pentagon Papers, none of the lesson learned documents were originally classified as a government secret. Once the Post pushed to make them public, however, other federal agencies intervened and classified some material after the fact. The State Department, for instance, asserted that releasing portions of certain interviews could jeopardize negotiations with the Taliban to end the war. We went in to do what? Wasn't it? Stop the Taliban. That's why we went in, right?
Yeah.
Lessons learned interviews contain few revelations about military operations, but running throughout are torrents of criticisms that refute the official narrative of war from its earliest days through the start of the Trump administration. At the onset, for instance, the U.S. invasion in Afghanistan had a clear stated objective to retaliate against al-Qaeda to prevent a repeat of the September 11, 2001 attacks. Yet the interviews show that as the war dragged on, the goals and mission kept changing, and a lack of faith in the U.S. strategy took root inside the Pentagon, the White House, and the State Department. Fundamental disagreements were unresolved. Some U.S. officials wanted to use the war to turn Afghanistan into a democracy. Others wanted to transform Afghan culture and elevate women's rights. Still others wanted to reshape the regional balance of power among Pakistan, India, Iran, and Russia, to just split it up between other countries. So there are all these groups of institutions who have their own objective or are in this country doing it, which none of them are on the same page with each other. Quote, with the AFPAC strategy, there was a present under the Christmas tree for everyone. An unidentified U.S. official told government interviewers in 2015, by the time you were finished, you had so many priorities and aspirations, it was like no strategy at all. And I also want to add, because that right there is exactly why we have a kill list that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of names long now. When the war started, we had a kill list of like 3 people. 3. Yeah. The lessons learned interviews also reveal how U.S. military commanders struggled to articulate who they were fighting, let alone why. Was Al-Qaeda the enemy or the Taliban? Was Pakistan a friend or an adversary? What about the Islamic State and the bewildering array of foreign jihadists, let alone the warlords on the CIA's payroll? According to the documents, the U.S. government never settled on an answer. Never, not even today. As a result, in the field, U.S. troops often couldn't tell friend from foe, and that's how a lot of mistakes and lives lost happen. Quote, they thought I was going to come to them with a map to show them where the good guys and bad guys live, end quote. An unnamed former advisor to an Army Special Forces team told government interviewers in 2017. 2017! It took several conversations for them to understand that I did not have that information in my hands. At first, they just kept asking, but who are the bad guys? Where are they? End quote. Nobody knows. He's supposed to be able to show them so they know what to do. That's his position. Who does he go to find out? Any one of those institutions will tell him something else, something different.
That was the Tsar's quote, wasn't it? Wasn't that the same guy?
No, that was an unnamed former advisor to an Army Special Forces team.
Gotcha. Either way, that one struck me like pretty hard, because I think he said it took 3 meetings for them to understand he really didn't have that information.
No, and there was no way for him to get it. However, he still has to do his job, which is what?
Point.
To what? Don't die. Yeah, this way.
Yeah.
And then I have just one more. Actually, it's 2 more quotes, but the first one is, they thought I was going to. Oh, that's the one. So it's just one more quote. That guy. But who are they and where are they? And he couldn't answer. The view wasn't any clearer from the Pentagon. Quote, I have no visibility into who the bad guys are, Rumsfeld complained in a September 8, 2003 snowflake. Quote, we are woefully deficient in human intelligence, end quote. I just, in 2009, I remember Obama saying the days for providing a blank check to the Pentagon is over. It must be clear that Afghans will have to take responsibility for their security and that America has no interest in fighting endless war in Afghanistan. In 2009, that's over 10 years ago now. We're almost 2020. On to the next president. Nothing's changed. I did want to add, because you love Robin Williams, I found a quote by him that is so spot on. It says, war is big money. Politicians, like baby nappies, must be changed regularly, and for the same reason. Robin Williams.
They're full of shit. Yeah, no, I love that.
And read the book War is a Racket. Everybody, it's on audio. It's like $2 to listen to the whole book. Read it, listen to it. War is a Racket. He explains that the whole, he fought in World War II. He was this amazing war hero, a really good guy even. And he comes back and retires and writes this book. And the reason why he wrote it is because he had a chance to be away from it all and to see how things hadn't really changed at home, and people were still starving, and people had to fight for everything they got, and there was injustice, and there was racism, and there was class. There's all these problems. Well, then he said, well, God, when I was in this country, all I was doing was helping the Dole Corporation make sure that these people let them plant bananas. And when I was in this country, I was making sure that these corporations were allowed to do what the fuck they wanted. And then when I went over here, I had to make sure that I worked for, these oil corporations. I had to go in, kill people if I needed to, and make sure that they let this corporation do what they wanted to do. That's the whole point, is that in this nation, the majority of people who sign up for the military come from socioeconomical hardships. They just do. They were told we can't afford college, or well, that's mainly it. If you want to get out of here, you're going to have to take it into your own hands, and this is a way out. And now, they offer $20,000 to resign. So you just did your 4 years, you don't want to do it again, but you're married and you have a kid, and they want to offer you $20,000 to resign. Where are you going? You're not going to find that anywhere else. $20,000 is not worth your life, but when you have nothing, it's everything. And to me, that is gross. That is so gross.
And how long is that?
Pay them enough.
How long are you signing your life away for that $20,000? How long is that deployment?
Well, when you resign, you can sign for 4 years, 2 years, 7 years. I guess it's just, if the Army has one, the Air Force has one, the Marines, they have their own. Gotcha. They run, resign. I forgot what it's called, but it is for re-signing. They also offer signing up. If you sign up today, you'll get $10,000 in your bank.
Right.
For 4 years,
you get that
paid first, and then you get paid your monthly. Which makes people go, "Gosh, I can give that $10,000 to my wife or my girlfriend or my pregnant girlfriend, and I can go into the military, and then we can live on my paychecks, and that will be set. We can get a house."
Right.
But
those military paychecks are like barely minimum wage half the time, aren't they?
Yeah, $19,000 a year.
Yeah. So
when you start
with that 20 you get for 4 years, and then you make half of I'll be generous and say 2/3 of like minimum wage. It's not worth it. It's not worth it at all. And then just look at how we treat our veterans afterwards. And then look at this report, and then just add on the salt in the wound for nothing.
Right.
It's absolutely shameful. And this is why when I just kind of swallow my tongue and I hear people talk about how proud they are of this country, because stuff like that makes me not proud of this country. And I don't like to say that.
Let's see if I can, maybe if I do this, where's my camera? Oh, I just turned it off.
Yeah, I think I turned it off.
There we go. Let's see. It says, "We won't fight another rich man's war." And it's a picture from Nam. So this protest was going on in Vietnam, at the end of Vietnam, towards the end of Vietnam. And it has every economic that you could think of, 12,000 a year, 50,000 a year, 100,000 a year, every color, every religion, because they come from everywhere at that point. They had, everyone had to join, unless you were Trump and you had bone spurs, or people like him that were like, Daddy, don't make me fight. Don't make me fight, Daddy. If that, and I get it. If I would conscientiously disagree, I would not do it.
A lot of people did. A lot of people.
Yes. Yeah. I'm not going to another nation to kill little brown people because of corporations. That's not going to happen. So I understand that, but it is true that the majority are poor people
Yeah.
who are fighting rich man's wars. And if that was happening at the end of NAM, I have to say it like that because it's so good. At the end of Vietnam, NAM, we need to get out in the street. We need to say no more fighting these wars that the people who are actually in the war fighting don't even know what they're in there for, don't even know who the bad guys are, what their objective is, what they're supposed to do when they're there. I feel like it's just happening again. I feel like Vietnam happened and nobody really learned anything, but what we did gain from Vietnam was a shit ton of money in the military industrial complex and selling weapons. Selling weapons is just, think about, we went after Hussein because of this, that, and the other. That's a whole other show. Whatever, we'll just go with the fact that we went after him to overthrow him. Nothing he did even compares to what the Saudi government is doing right now.
Nope.
But he nationalized his resources to his country. He got off the petrodollar, a few things that we will not stand by and let happen. And I don't want that to be in my name. What's wrong with a country nationalizing the resources for their people? I don't see a problem with it. I would love for our country to do that. I would love to nationalize water. Everybody needs it. Why shouldn't we just have our own water and Nestle get the fuck out?
We should.
Go back to Scandinavia where it's a happy index. Well, they're not allowed to do that in Scandinavia. They can do that here in third world countries.
Nationalizing natural resources, not good for capital gain.
Not good for, and when you hear national interests in any story, just replace national interest with corporations' interests, and you'll understand exactly what they're talking about.
I really hate that phrase because
I do too.
I've learned that every time they say it, they don't specify, and they don't specify for a reason. And it's exactly the reason that you just laid out. So I want to...
Yeah, Noam Chomsky is the one I learned that from. He said, anytime you hear national interest, just take it out and put in corporation interest or corporate interest and reread it or rehear it. And you'll hear what they're really saying.
Yeah, no. Yes, no, yes, you're right.
Yeah. Right? This whole story makes me yes, no, yes, no, yes, no.
And it's almost nothing new. It's just the evidence of what's already so apparent.
Like I said before I started, it's like duh. Duh. It's just nice that at least I know that somebody that didn't know or wasn't informed, at least a few people are now informed, and that's we've got to keep spreading.
Yeah.
You know, and if you don't know, ask questions or go look it up. I mean,
and we have something now that's very solid. Look at this document. Look at these documents.
Yes.
And they're very clear. We now have the Afghanistan papers. That's something. That's news on its own. Besides just knowing it. I'm not sure if you mentioned this part, but it was something that I remembered. One of the lies that was pushed, especially for the media, is if like resistance, if retaliation from the Taliban was heightened, we were winning because they're scared and they're desperate.
Yep.
And if that resistance slowed down,
we're winning.
We're winning because they're back now.
Exactly.
It's a logical fallacy.
Yeah, it's called spin. Spin it to work. Spin it to work.
Yes. So I wanted to share because I didn't hear you say that part, but you might have. I might have just missed it. But
I didn't. There's so much. I implore everyone to read the documents. I went through. There's over 2,000. So it's a lot of reading, and I fell asleep with it last night on the. apple thingy, and because it laid down on me, I like ended up going somewhere else. I guess my boobs were like pushing buttons and stuff. So I ended up somewhere totally different. I'm looking at it like, why would I ever be here? Yeah, they have a mind of their own.
Yeah, I guess so.
They want to be a part of the democratic process.
We do. But they should have rights.
Community news, and real quick, Brant. So when your niece needs to know where her little baby turtle is, he's right there. He's on top of the Christmas tree for this week. So I'll move him again for her next week.
That's awesome. I love that.
And, Godless Cranium, if you guys follow him, I love the way his channel is going. And he has been, he started on a series about fascism history and now, and how it's coming together and how you can learn from history. You don't have to repeat it. There's so much in it. I did not do it justice just now. Well, he put out a clip-it or a snippet of what his next #2 in the series is going to be, and YouTube took it down and told him that if he does that again, that he's going to have a strike against his channel. However, you can read this if you go to his channel in the about. The clips he used in it are from channels that are monetized right now. So that's infuriating, and I don't know what we could do. I do think we should pay attention to it, and if he does have a problem, be ready to just start, tweeting and emailing YouTube and driving them crazy till they're like, just give it back. Just give it back. Nobody's going to leave us alone until we. That has worked. It's worked with quite a few of the content creators that we all love and view on a regular basis that have had problems. And this is just bull crap. The fact that the clips are from channels that are currently monetized. Unacceptable. YouTube. We really need an alternative. A YouTube equivalent that is not going to do this.
Yeah.
It's unacceptable.
It's crap, and we really do need to watch what happens there, because Godless Cranium does a lot of really wonderful work. We need to really stand up for that.
I agree.
But
I mean, seriously, he's like so sweet. Why? There's no ill intent. He's not violent. It's all to help humanity. It's like educational. I don't get it. I mean, I get it. He is bringing up hard truths that are hard for people will be offended. They're snowflakes.
No kidding. Talk a lot about snowflakes tonight without really talking about snowflakes.
I really like snowflakes, though. They're each unique and beautiful, but as soon as you touch them in any way, they melt.
Okay, so real quick, I know we're more or less off the topic now, but I did want to give kudos for the story, for the Afghanistan papers. One, obviously Washington Post, because they did some wonderful work and they went through a lot of fucking shit to get this report to us. So when you do something right, you get kudos, and rightfully so. A lot of people are giving them kudos and doing what they usually do. So like Jimmy Dore, Secular Talk, I think the Humanist Report, Brainlit, June's channel, they all covered this, and it was and that's good. That's great. That's what we're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. Also, I found out about this on Fox.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the second time that I'd seen it on like a major news channel was on Fox.
Wow.
Or like mentioned in a thumbnail for Tuckerson.
Mm-hmm.
Tucker Carlson. I always do that. It's funny. So I mean, like, kudos to Fox, but what I'm really seeing is when it comes to anything related to war, over 50% of the time at least, Tucker Carlson is right, or he's at least talking about it. And I hate that, because I don't like that guy, because he's more or less an awful human being. But he does talk about important things, and credit where credit's due.
Absolutely.
So we have to give him that. I just wish we could give that credit to other news outlets. I know that MSNBC. I looked up Afghanistan papers and MSNBC, and it looks like the last mentions, at least video-wise, were December 9th and December 10th.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're not talking about it, or I'm sorry, it's not that they didn't mention it.
Right. There you go.
That's the thing. Because
nobody wants to. It's December.
it is December, and we
that's icky. They can go read. They can go read that from Washington Post. I mean, we'll talk that Washington Post did a thing. They did a thing really for democracy. It's next. Trump did this. Trump tweeted this.
Yeah.
Russia made him do it.
This is really one of the most important topics of the year, I think. Yeah. And
war is a massive topic.
Yeah.
War is massive, and there should be no such thing as offensive war. It should be defensive only, and I am 100% behind that. I don't think anybody could change my mind on that. I mean, I welcome anyone to try, but defensive war is you defend yourself. You don't go in and poke another country and offensively attack them.
No, I mean, we do, but, but still.
We do.
Okay, so everyone, please do me a favor, because we're not going to cover this topic again, although it really may have been the most important topic of the year. But follow the link I just posted in the live chat. Please let us know what you guys thought was the most important or interesting topic of 2019, because we want to cover things that you guys want to hear about for the last show of the year. So we'll keep an eye on that. Please share it. Please say something. All week I've only gotten something from Being Beelzebub, from Ben. So he said the Tory victory in the UK, Trump impeachment, and the Vatican sex abuse summit.
Yeah, what a better place for child sexual predators to do that. They have their own police force, their own courts, they could dump bodies, and it's just another duh. If they do that in churches around the world, why wouldn't they do that in their sovereign area?
Yeah, no kidding. So just more things to think about. Like, we had Julian Assange arrested. We had
children in cages.
Yeah, children in cages. We had the hostile takeover of the Venezuelan embassy here in the U.S.
We had a coup in Bolivia.
Yep.
Where Bolivia just yesterday put out another their arrest warrant for Evo Miranda. Is like, first of all, what? Yeah.
All the fires going on around the globe.
It's been 2019 has been. I mean, I'm ready to let it go.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Makes me nervous for 2020, but so there's really a lot. There's a lot to talk about, and like I said, I want to take the top 3 and try to do as much research as we can for next week. So you guys, you need to let us know soon, and you need to retweet this so we have some more suggestions. Otherwise, we'll just do it one, or what Ben wants here. So, but yeah, so please share that out, comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe. So, because we're also trying to get to 666 subscribers before we hit the new year, because that would be Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's a good number.
Yeah. Any last words, Miss Christy Santiago?
No, read.
Read, please read.
Yeah, read. Definitely read the Afghanistan papers, and then read the Pentagon papers, read the Panama papers, and see what they have in common and what we can learn from them. And also be politically informed and get ready to volunteer. I want everyone to volunteer. It doesn't matter who you choose or who you want to vote for. Be part of the democratic process. If it means licking envelopes and then sending them to people, or emails or phone calls, or knocking on doors, hi, my name is blah, 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 and I want to talk to you about insert candidate. I think that I encourage everyone to be a part of it. I honestly want every single American who is capable and able to vote. First, I have a preference, but I would rather everyone vote for someone than only the people who are going to vote for the person I like. Like I'd rather there be like 98% voters. Like, what? We would blow their minds. I think that's call me a dreamer. I just want everyone to care. I want everyone to care and make decisions on actually looking into stuff. And if you're okay with the war machine using half of the entire year's funding, like on a pie chart, it goes like almost in half and then a little bit more. So more than half gets spent on the military industrial complex. And if you're okay with that, and then on top of it, not knowing what we're even doing in these places, bombing 8 countries at once, can you name the 8? And why can't you? Why is that not important? These things to me are so important. And I think that's why I show up every Friday, because they
just gotta get your priorities straight, Christy.
Yeah. And then I do want to share something really cute. So for Christmas, we always get jammies for Christmas and go to the movies on Christmas Day every year. So this year I got this like the top is like a sweatshirt material. It's pajamas, but it says my dog thinks I'm kind of some, or my dog thinks I'm, oh shit, I forgot. I wish Stacey was awake. My dog thinks I'm kind of special, or something kind of special. It's so cute. I can't wait to wear it and hold Mr. Bean. That's all. ended on a good note. There are many wonderful and good things to be happy about. There really are. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about the other ones. Just because it's a week before Christmas, there are still things that are going on. There's lots of people that didn't eat today, and there's lots of people that are worried about that and doing something about it. So every time we speak about, awful things, there's lots of good people who care about it. There really are. We're not the only ones that care about it and are out there doing something about it. And I think that it's good to know about all of it and take it all in and then make your decisions. And
yeah,
that's it.
All right, everyone. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
And say Humanism.
Or happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah. Whatever you do, I hope you guys have a nice holiday season. Thank you for joining us for these 2 shows on this wonderful Friday night. And we hope you all have a wonderful weekend.
Happy Friday.
Yeah. Stay humanist.
For God's sake.